Dear students, today we are going to discuss the chapter 6 of the book of Foreign Policy Analysis. The name of the chapter 6 is Foreign Policy Preferences of States. Within this chapter, we have two important learning outcomes. The first one is comprehend the dynamics of different foreign policy preferences that states could potentially employ in their external relations. The second one is comprehend the dynamics of soft power as a foreign policy preference and distinguish its differences from other power conceptualizations. Foreign policy preferences of states are not the same as foreign policy behaviors of states. Foreign policy preferences are about how states think they could achieve their national interests abroad in a long-term perspective. Behaviors are particular policies to be implemented in the field. Preferences are about what those foreign policy interests are, whereas behaviors are about how those interests can be achieved. In this context, this chapter discusses alternative foreign policy preferences that states could potentially adopt in line with their national interests. In this framework, we can start with the first foreign policy, alternative foreign policy preference of the states is isolationism. Isolationism suggests that states would not want to get involved in political developments taking place outside their territorial borders. Isolationist states tend to believe that their geographical location, power capabilities, and the nature of terrain on which they sit will protect them against external threats. Countries which tend to pursue isolationist foreign policies generally believe that they are self-sufficient and capable of meeting all their needs on their own. Countries that tend to pursue isolationist foreign policies are predisposed to believe that they are inherently different from other countries in terms of historical experiences, regime type, and national values. Also, countries that pursue isolationism abroad would not put claims to regional or international leadership at the center of their foreign policy thinking. The relevance of both logics, namely self-sufficiency and internal fragility, to isolationism can be clearly seen in the example of the United States foreign policy. Since its establishment in the late 18th century till the beginning of the 20th century, the United States pursued an isolationist foreign policy. During this era, the United States had been weaker than many European colonial powers, and the latter had geopolitical designs in the American continent. Another country that has adopted an isolationist foreign policy is North Korea. Here, the logic of fragility is more prevalent than the logic of self-sufficiency, even though the Pyongyang regime has put the logic of self-sufficiency at the center of its national interests since the end of the Korean War in 1953. Another foreign policy preferences that states could employ is internationalism. Unlike isolationism, internationalism assumes that states define their national identity and interests in such a way to underline the interests and identities that they share with others in common. From the perspective of internationalism, states think they can achieve their foreign policy interests through close interactions and cooperation with other states in the system. Isolationism and protectionism are discarded in favor of developing closer bonds with other states in different foreign policy realms. Internationalism holds out that all states sail on the same ship and they need to align their policies with each other in order to not lose in the globalizing world. Further integration within a globalizing environment will push states to cooperate with a view to find solutions to common problems and challenges in the international arena. Internationalism owes a great part of its existence as a foreign policy preferences to the liberal conceptualization of international relations. Thereby, states could mitigate the negative consequences of anarchical structure of international relations and bring into existence a community of common interests and identities by increasing interdependence and cooperation among each other. Countries which pursue internationalism as a foreign policy course also tend to believe that it is in their national interest to bring about a particular regional or international environment in line with their national priorities. And also it is generally the case that countries which are comparatively more powerful than others in their regions and globally pursue internationalist foreign policies. Liberal and realist impulses can simultaneously shape the tone of the internationalism, whereas liberal internationalism pleads for the formation of a community of states united around common liberal identities, values and interests. Realist internationalism is mainly about interstate cooperation on the ground of common foreign and security policy interests. Realist internationalists do not argue in favor of regime or nation-building attempts abroad. Cooperating with illiberal, non-democratic regimes in other countries in the name of stability and material national interests would be a typical foreign policy course of action sanctified by realist internationalism. Another difference between the two is that realist internationalists would redefine foreign policy as an exercise in the name of producing an impact only on the foreign policy behaviors of other states, whereas liberal internationalism would go much further than this by putting the transformation of identities and values of other states at the center of foreign policy. One of the foreign policy assets of countries is alliance relationships they build with other states. Therefore, alliance and balancing is another foreign policy principle of states. We can discuss it. Alliance relations are different from all others in that members of alliance commit to each other's security, survival and territorial integrity and promise to come each other's aid in case any of them were attacked by countries outside the alliance. Alliance signify a much deeper cohesion among its members. This cohesion and we-feeling might be constructed on the basis of common identity and values or common strategic security interests. The cohesion and harmony would be the highest if alliance members united around both common identity and common interests. The best example in this regard would be NATO. In this framework, NATO is a typical example of hard balancing in that members bring their material power capabilities together with a view to resist common external threats. Alliance of hard balancing to also have organizational existence in that members establish formal institutional bureaucratic relations under the roof of alliance organizations. On the other hand, countries that form soft balancing exercise tend to have similar threat perceptions, values, and international vision, yet they also want to preserve their maneuvering capability in relations with other countries. The growing strategic cooperation between Russia and China within the United Nations, the Shanghai Cooperation Organizations, or BRICS is an example of soft balancing in international relations. Another foreign policy preferences that states could potentially adopt is neutrality. Neither isolationism nor internationalism precludes the possibility of adopting neutrality as a foreign policy preferences. Neutral states do not take sides in regional or international power competitions. They can achieve this through either isolating themselves from the outside world or trying to develop sustainable functional relations with many states. States might declare that they would form now or maintain neutrality, yet for such intentions to be respected by others, other states should also give their approval. Neutrality is a risky decision to take because if other states do not recognize the neutrality claims of the party concerned, the latter might lie in the middle of geopolitical confrontations between rival power blocs. For example, the Netherlands had claimed to remain neutral on the eve of the First and Second World Wars, yet it could not escape the German aggression on both occasions. The best would arise if the neutrality claims of states were recognized by international agreements. Austria offers the best example in this regard. And also Switzerland is the best example in this regard. Neutrality claims being recognized by international agreements and sanctified by international law would likely prove more resilient than unilateral decisions to that matter. Turkish foreign policy during the Second World War can also be seen as an example of adopting neutrality as a foreign policy preference. During the course of the war, Turkish decision makers did their best to avoid the possibility of being attacked by other side. Turkey took side of neither the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan, nor the allied powers of the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. The discussion of foreign policy preferences is also closely related with the way of how one state might try to influence foreign policy choice and behaviors of another. A group of academics nested in different disciplines and inspired by the pioneering works of Joseph Nye have popularized the concept of soft power in their attempts at explaining the internal character and foreign policies of such global powers as the United States and the European Union. Soft power has become more relevant in foreign policy preferences of states as the real political mentality of the Cold War times has been replaced by the logic of integration, interdependence, and globalization following the demise of the Soviet Union and the projected triumph of liberal democracy. Power is the ability of one actor to influence the behavior, interests, and identity of other actors in the image of its own priorities, preferences, and values. This means that power has both residual and relational aspects. It's residual because being powerful means that a particular state possesses some capabilities of both tangible and intangible sorts that would enable it to have an impact on the choices and actions of others. Without those capabilities at the first instance, it is nearly impossible to influence others. The will dimension of power concerns the motivations, aspirations, and national images of actors that aspire to have a say on the choice of others. The capability dimension concerns the source of power, both tangible and intangible in kind. The relational dimension pertains to the perceptual attributes of power. For a particular actor to be considered as powerful, all of the three dimensions mentioned above need to be taken into account, rather than how other states within the system perceive the power capabilities of the actor in question. What is important here is the way how the state that wants to have an impact on the choices and values of other things, from which sources its power capabilities emanate. In this sense, some states are defined as hard powers, meaning that tangible power capabilities at their disposal would enable them to influence the choices and values of other states. Hard power capabilities can be of both military and non-military nature. Soft powers can also be defined as persuasive soft powers, which are those that think they need to legitimacy and attraction in the eyes of others. They develop specific strategies not only to brandish their achievements, but also persuade others that their behaviors and policies are legitimate and other regarding. Their ability to influence others stem from their specific efforts to improve their attraction. In this context, power is in general the ability to get what one wants through different strategies. Having influence on identity, preferences, and behaviors of other actors is what power is about. Power has will, capability, and relational aspects. Having power capabilities does not mean that the actor is powerful. To be powerful and having power over others requires a strong degree of determination to make use of those capabilities, as well as a decision of other parties to change their identities, interests, or behaviors in line with the preference of the power holder. In this sense, power is very much related with having influence over others. Influence can emanate from different power relationships: power of coercion, power of enticement, power of manipulation, power of persuasion, power of manufactured attraction, and power of attraction are the most important power relationships. Foreign policy preferences are about how states think they could achieve their national interests abroad in long-term perspective. In the context of this chapter, behaviors are particular policies to be implemented in the field. Preferences are about what those foreign policy interests are, whereas behaviors are about how those interests can be achieved. Alternative foreign policy preferences that states could potentially employ in their external relations are isolationism, internationalism, alliance and balancing, neutrality, and soft and hard power. Other foreign policy strategies are derived of these main categories. As a conclusion, this chapter discussed alternative foreign policy preference of states such as isolationism, internationalism, alliance formation, balancing, neutrality, hard power, and soft power. Dear students, thank you very much for following this chapter.